Obviously, like, I let him in. I genuinely don't think I've ever actually said that out loud before. I think it's been a while actually since I've probably even thought about that. Next month, I will be carrying an 88.5 kilo strongman yoke for 15 miles through the mountains of Utah. In short, I'm an ex-Royal Marine and I am doing this for a veterans charity. I am making no money from this, nor are any real costs subsidised in any way, I don't think, actually. In fact, the whole thing is costing me about £3,000 in accommodation, in flights, in a yoke that I had to buy and ship over here to Cyprus. So why the hell am I doing all of this crazy stuff? Well, in 2021, I got some bad news, and in 2022, I got some worse news. One of my best friends from the Marines was a guy that I was in training with, right? So we were training together, we passed out together, we got deployed to the same troop within the same company, within the same unit, which is super rare, and then went to Afghan and did Herrick together in 2011. Afghan is obviously going to affect different people in different ways, and obviously I loved him like a brother. It was very obvious that he was struggling at times when we were there. So sometimes he'd have kind of panic attacks, he'd have kind of crazy outbursts of anger at kind of really random people that he kind of hardly knew and that he didn't have any beef with. And I think the worst thing was actually he just started to isolate himself a little bit more. Sometimes, like, even from me, and sometimes especially from me, which was a really kind of interesting thing, which was obviously pretty sad at the time. When we got back, it didn't really get any better for him. So I think things, I'm getting like redder and sweatier by the second, and I don't know. I think the odds are on me not exactly making it all the way through this video without crumbling slightly. So things didn't get better for him when he got back, and he again was really angry at a lot of people. Like, he ended up in a couple of fights. He continued to isolate himself from certain people, and I think the worst thing was he like pretty heavily turned to drugs, which like obviously like probably had the intended effect, which was like a short-term relief from the pain, but started to kind of like, you know, bake his brain a little bit over a longer period of time. And in all honesty, like, he started to piss a lot of people off because he was just acting really quite aggressively to a lot of them. It was very out of character, but it just started like to become a little bit more kind of on brand and started to become something that he did a bit more frequently, which is obviously very worrying. So he obviously felt isolated. He started to feel quite lonely, even though obviously, like, you know, he wasn't helping himself. But again, that's very much going to make things worse in a military environment where you basically all live in the same fucking building. If you're starting to feel isolated and you're starting to feel like somebody that other people might not necessarily want to be around, it's going to have a really like heavy effect on you. There was one time that I remember, fucking hell, man, I don't think I've ever actually even told this story. I don't think I've even said this out loud. So we were at a rugby game. I think it was like a Royal Marines versus someone rugby game. Like, different people were there, a couple of people from different units that we hadn't seen for ages, and some of us obviously knew each other because it's quite a, you know, small Royal Marine family. And he was just very quiet and he was kind of isolated. He was angry that other people were there and just kind of had a bit of a like sour expression. And we kind of went outside after the game, and I asked him about it, and he just blew up at me, and he like properly snapped at me, which was very rare for him because I was the person that kind of like had his fucking back the whole time. We ended up leaving, like, you know, I was probably shouting back. I'm not going to say that I wasn't, and I think I left in like one car, and he like walked off and then got a cab back or something. And he started knocking on my door a couple of hours later, and he was like, Jim, come on, man, like, I'm sorry. Like, open up, please open up. And you could just hear like how broken and confused he was, and he was like, mate, please open up, like, come on, man, like, please, I've got nobody else. And obviously, like, I let him in. I genuinely don't think I've ever actually said that out loud before. I think it's been a while actually since I've probably even thought about that. So everything kind of gets a little bit better for a short period of time, but then I leave the Corps at the end of 2012, and I do try to stay in contact with him, and like, I'm phoning him like all the time, and most of the time like he is picking up, but the frequency of which he is picking up and he is like having a conversation with me starts to dial down. like month and month and month and month. And I probably told myself this at the time. I was like, there's only so much I can do, right? Like if I'm phoning him and he's not answering, like, there's only so much I can do. And that kind of goes down. I get a little bit worried. I speak to a few other people. He basically goes completely off grid for a couple of years. Actually, for like 2 years, no one hears from him. Like we end up reaching out to his family. They're a little bit kind of like funny about everything. And then he kind of comes out the woodwork like a couple of years later, and we're like, fucking, this is mental. But we were kind of happy that we'd spoke to him, because we knew that he'd basically been struggling since kind of like the day that we got to Helmand, really. And a couple of us meet up, me, him, and a third one of our friends. So me and the friend that I'm telling the story about, we were joint godfathers to our other friend's 2 sons. So it was really nice. It was like a cool, like really beautiful catch up, because the sons were there and our other friend was there, and we were all kind of talking, and it was really nice. But it was quite sad, because there was it was obvious that things had got worse for him mentally, not just emotionally, but like really psychologically. Like there was a level of I won't go into details because I think it would be quite disrespectful, but in essence there was a level of there was a detachment from reality that was very obviously real. Like he thought that certain things were happening that just were not happening, and it was scary, and I didn't know what to do, and I felt pretty fucking helpless. Actually, he wasn't asking for help. He was adamant this was happening. But looking back on it now, now I don't know what I would have done. I couldn't have done anything myself. I'm not trained in this. I consider myself a fairly kind of conventionally masculine guy, but I'm also extremely compassionate with the way in which I communicate, and I have no problem with a guy kind of crying on my shoulder. And I would have loved it if he'd have done that, because I think things might have been easier, because it was just so fucking obvious that he was just in pain. And it was like you could see through it really like transparently that he was just angry at certain things, but it wasn't anger, it was just sadness and hurt. But I just didn't know what to do in that situation with this guy that I just kind of like loved like a brother, but I just had this mental kind of last few years with, and I just didn't know how to handle it. But I was just grateful that it was such a weird, like paradoxical couple of days, because we all got to catch up, and it was so beautiful. We were just both glad that this guy was back in our lives and he wasn't kind of completely off the grid again. But at the same time, it was very obvious that he wasn't well. And then about a week later, and I was kind of working out what I should do, whether or not I should try to get him help or something. And about a week later, he messages me and he just flips out. And again, it's like he thought I was lying about something, and like again the details are a little bit kind of mental and require a lot more context. But basically he became angry at me because he thought that I'd done certain things that I wasn't even involved in. So he completely cut me out and just refused to speak to me. And this was like back in like 2019, I think. And then 2021, we find out that there has been like a missing persons alert put out for him. Part of me, I was in kind of two minds actually. I really didn't know with this. Like part of me was thinking, half of me was terrified that he'd done something stupid, and the other half of me was aware that because he was so paranoid and there was so much fear and there was that detachment from reality, that maybe he had just gone off grid and just disappeared somewhere, but at least he might be okay if he felt safe being completely under the radar. I don't know. Unfortunately, 6 months later ish, like beginning of 2022, me and the gang, we basically find out that they'd found his body. So he'd taken his own life, he'd hung himself in a tree, and they found him in a forest after about 6 months. They obviously had to do whatever they need to do, and they ID'd him. And like breaking the fourth wall of all of this, like a couple of years later, sometimes I think about it and I feel a bit numb. Actually, I don't really feel anything, and then maybe I might layer on a little bit of confusion and shame for not really feeling anything. And then other times I think about it, or something reminds me that this has happened, and it just fucking breaks me. And I can tell myself that I couldn't have done anything else, and I don't know whether or not I could have done. I don't know whether or not I'm being selfish by trying to convince myself that I couldn't have done anything else, because he was a bit of an anomaly, because he was very mentally unwell. But it's just sad, like it's a fucking hole, and because it's just permanent, like there's nothing that you can do. And I think that's the thing with regret, where you wish you could have helped someone, that what if open loop never gets to be closed. And that's hard, man. And it's tough when, like, again, people have been through far worse than me and have had to have seen far worse than me. But for me, the hard bit was like seeing the cracks start to kind of grow over time. Like I saw him when we were literally in the middle of fucking nowhere in a village in rural Afghanistan together. I saw what he was like through that journey. I saw what he was like for the next year and putting himself away from the rest of the company. I know that he went off grid. I was the last one, like me and my other friend, we were basically the last ones to see him alive. And we saw that he was ill. And probably 80% of the time, I actually don't beat myself up too much about it. I'm not going to like try and make this a sob story. Like I'm not wanting everyone to be like, oh mate, there's nothing you could have done, whatever. Like that's not the intention behind this. Probably like closer to like 90 to 95% of the time, I do acknowledge that there's not really that much more I could have done, especially at the end, because he just cut ties with me and he just blocked me. But that 5% is like just like a fucking thorn. And then overarching on all of that, it doesn't matter if I could have done more, if I couldn't have done more, if anyone was able to help him, if some people were, ifs, buts, whatever. The real kind of like just like heaviness comes from the overarching realization that all of those are just thought processes that don't matter because it has happened and there's nothing you can fucking do about it now. And that's the heaviness that sometimes kind of kicks in, that it's like one of your best mates killed himself and you basically saw everything unravel. And it's fucking dark, man. And obviously like attempting to somewhat get my shit together in the next kind of few minutes and link this to like what I'm doing with this event. I've done 4 different events in the last 7 years where I've raised money for Rock to Recovery. But obviously this one, it's a little bit more personal, and this is my first solo one. The whole purpose of this particular like feat is it's supposed to be like a visual representation. So the reason that I'm carrying something that's over 85 kilos is 84.9 kilos is the average weight of the British man. So the whole purpose of this is it's a visual representation of a man's willingness to carry another man when he may not be able to carry himself, because so fucking many of us would. And that's the thing, and I do believe that the modern man gets a lot of shit for being weak and not being particularly resilient, and that's a different conversation topic in and of itself. I believe that something that is innately masculine is the fact that if another man is struggling, we would fucking put them on our back and we would do whatever we need to do if they are unable to do it themselves. Like the proper like breaking of the fourth wall of all of this is not like me saying that, you know, this is why it's so great. And like, I mean, Rock to Recovery are fucking amazing. This is why I've like gone back to this charity as being the group of people that I support. And the whole purpose of Rock to Recovery, the whole kind of ethos, is rock, like resembling like a mountain as an example. It's like mountain to recovery. The whole purpose is like climbing a mountain. It's like a task, like you have an objective, you have something to work towards, you have purpose, and overcoming adversity in the preparation of doing something, like again notionally climbing a mountain. It like reinforces like a sense of capability. For men particularly, I think is, you know, maybe the only way to not feel as though we're useless, is maybe the only way to heal, to recover. So Rock to Recovery is, you know, makes kind of a hell of a lot of sense. And for the irony is, this is not only me doing this to help other people. I'm not going to make myself a fucking saint, because that is just not the case at all. I actually think, since I've done some introspection on this, I think it's probably a lot more selfish than that, in all honesty. And I'm just going to be completely honest about that. I think it is. I think a lot of it's for my own healing. And I know that it's my own healing because moving into this, more so than any event or any physical challenge I've ever done, I really want it to hurt, which is not an overly healthy way to look at things, but maybe to prove to myself that I'm not useless, and maybe to prove to myself that I could have done something, and that I am capable of doing that, and that I am capable of carrying another man, and that I can't really articulate it, but I hope you kind of like know what I mean. But that's why I'm doing this, and that's why this event is so fucking important to me, because I will do whatever I can, but obviously there has to be a level of specialist help on offer to people who need specialist help. And that's what Rock to Recovery do, because they have different methodologies. They have professional vehicles to help in a way that I'm not going to be able to do, and that laymen aren't going to be able to do. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. I wasn't really expecting the video to go this way, but I sat down, and as soon as I started talking, I was like, there's no way I make it 10 minutes, because I'm aware of what I need to talk about, and I'm aware of the fact that it's still has an effect, of course. So that's why I'm doing this event. That's why I'm carrying an 88.6 kilo yoke for 15 miles. And I know it's going to hurt, I know it's going to suck, but I don't think I've ever been more sure that I won't give up, because I can't. And I've never had more conviction that I won't let myself give up than this. I've adhered to a training program more than I've ever adhered to one in my life over the last few months. And the thing that I want to kind of like attempt to bring your attention to is that I don't think anything that I've shared, I think the worst part of this entire thing is that the stuff that I've shared might not actually be that rare. I might not be that much of an outlier. And that sucks, because it means there might be more people that feel like this than we would obviously like, which is why groups like Rock to Recovery that can offer specialist help, like we can do what we can do. And I think that everybody has a responsibility, and I think that pretty much every guy out there would absolutely rather have their friends cry on their shoulder than their friends not be here anymore. And I think that we can do 90% of that by just holding ourselves to a higher standard of being a man. But the 10% that we might not be able to do, professional help is needed, and that's where all the amazing work that they do comes in. So please donate in the link in the description. I want to raise $5,000, absolute minimum. I'd like to raise 50, but because at the end of the day this does go towards helping people. But I'll wrap this up there. If you are still watching, thank you for your patience of seeing this silly man cry on the video, which is something that I never thought that I'd do, but that's the way the cookie crumbled today, apparently so. Thank you guys. Any questions on anything, any questions on the event, if you want any more information, just put something down in the comment section below. I will get back to you, and thank you for watching. Please do subscribe. You have my word that not all of my videos are this existential and nihilistic. Most of them are a little bit more upbeat. And thanks for watching. See you soon.